My name is Nick Howell. I am the Global Field CTO here at NetApp, specifically for our Public Cloud Services business unit. And that means it's pretty much my job to make sure that everybody in the world knows what we're doing at NetApp. We're not just doing storage anymore. Newsflash. Excuse me for just 1 second. Chip, I'm in the middle of presenting. What's up? What do you mean the website's down? Well, I mean, we could move it up to AWS real quick if you want. Yeah, can give me like 30 minutes and it'll be up there. All right, I gotta go. Bye. Excuse me, bear with me 1 second real quick. All right, I got a stupid website. Sales guys, right? We're gonna go create stack. Who loves YAML? Everybody loves YAML, right? We're all infrastructure people. Love YAML. Let's see. Let's get I prefer XML. We'll go next. Stack name. We'll JavaScript for the win. Chips website. There. Name chip. And we don't need any of this other stuff. Next. All right, fine. So we'll come back to this. We'll deal with chip when we get done presenting. What a long, strange trip it's been, right? This is really near and dear to me because at the end of the day, we've been very invested in being a part of Field Day because we love this kind of focused discussion and interaction with the delegates and everything. And it goes all the way back to even before 2017, but I started here specifically because this is where the changeover started happening. And you can even date it back to like 2012 when I was installing Ontap, hacking it into EC2 in a weird way. 2014, we came out with the data fabric concept. And then starting in 2017, we started presenting these concepts to you guys over the course of many years. And we brought it through 2018 and 2019. 2020, we started getting into things like tier 1 applications running in the cloud on some of the services that we're doing and showing how beneficial that is. And last year, we launched ASTRA, and that's come a long way in a year. So at the end of the day, we've got a lot of stuff. And guys, I'm going to warn you in advance, I brought the fire hose today. So I want to make sure that I get through a lot of this stuff so that you have an idea. Because the point of me showing you all of those slides just now that we've been on this journey together is because throughout that process, this is GA and this is in beta and this is in preview and this isn't quite ready in this region yet and all of these little nuances, right? Everything I'm going to talk to you about today is at least in public preview. All of this stuff we're about to go over for the next hour is at least in public preview. 95% of it is generally available and you can go use it today. So lots of stuff that's been happening over the course of the last decade. If we just cite the last couple of years, especially 2020, we saw Spot, Talon, and CloudJumper join NetApp through acquisition. We also last year launched Amazon FSX for NetApp Ontap, or I should say AWS launched Amazon FSX for NetApp Ontap. And we also launched ASTRA Control, or the ASTRA suite of products, I should say, that started as one thing, but has now become its own little mini portfolio in a way. And we'll go over a lot of that stuff today. But across the board, we're going to go over everything from the foundations of storage all the way up to application management, automation through various integration points, as you might have just seen me give a quick little demonstration, and I'll go back to that after the presentation, and we'll show you guys what's been going on. Who'd have thunk it that a box vendor 10 years ago would have something like this? This gives me all the pride in the world, all the feels, because this is what we've been hard at work at for 5 years now. And it's amazing that we've gotten as far as we have in the last 5 years. And for the purpose of the demonstration, if you guys want to see all of this stuff actually in practice, this is just a screenshot from our website, cloud.netapp.com. Each of these things that you see are clickable pages. You can get a full description of each and every one of them. You can get a full demo, free trial, nothing required. All of it is out there, ready to go, almost in a consumer model kind of way. This all really started about 5 years ago when a combination of things started to happen. We had the cloud providers coming to us, asking us how to do storage better in the cloud. We had our own interests of getting into the public clouds, and this kind of meeting of the minds came together. Started out by putting some arrays in Equinix, co-locating things there, cross-connecting. What we realized was that, very quickly, was that PaaS and managed services were going to be the future, right? If not eventually SaaS, complete SaaS. But people are getting away from turning knobs on infrastructure. They're ready to get to a point where they can deploy set settings like I just did with a YAML file, right? But the beauty of what you see on the screen here is that the relationships, the things that we've built over the last 5 years, AWS is sitting here in the room with me while I present today. Like 5 years ago, that would have been like, what? Why are they doing that? So the relationships that we've built over those years is really the key takeaway here. But across all three public clouds, we have storage and data management services that were chosen by the big three public clouds. That's important. They chose us, right? Sold, supported, and billed by all of those cloud providers, not NetApp. Not NetApp. This is stuff that the cloud providers themselves are doing, right? Speaking of chosen, I can remember a time 5 years ago when this slide was all zeros. This is, again, one of those, if I'm beating my chest, I'm sorry, we've been hard at work for the last 5 years, and it's been 3 years since I've seen you guys, almost 3 years. We've been busy since the last time you saw us. So let's go over what the strategy is, how we got to where we are, what's new, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to take you deep down the rabbit hole on the entire portfolio. So, right, this really starts with kind of a mantra of Ontap everywhere. What do I mean by that? Well, about 20 years ago, NetApp kind of innovated around bringing unified storage together by putting block storage and file storage on the same arrays. Well, what if we did that for virtualization as well with shared storage 10 years ago? And then now we're kind of doing the same thing for cloud. You can now deploy a virtual instance or a managed service of Ontap in all three public clouds and have block and file all in the same one. And it can even manage object beyond that. So you now have the unified storage story in the cloud as well.
Nick, are there any services that are running in the cloud environments that could come back on premises, but don't exist on premises within the on-premises offerings?
That's kind of the point. I love the way you phrase that. So I'll give you a real use case. I was at reInvent a couple of months ago, back in Thanksgiving timeframe, and I had a customer come up to me and say, I had never heard of NetApp, I had never heard of Ontap, until we stumbled across FSX in AWS. We had other three-letter vendors in our data centers, right? We had never even really paid attention. Mm-hmm. The minute we saw FSX and how easy it was, we immediately threw everything else out and deployed NetApp because Ontap everywhere. What does that unlock for you as an end user? It unlocks that ability to take advantage of all of our flex and snap words, efficiencies, all of that stuff. So when you build into that kind of single unified platform, the value outweighs the cost savings you might get by going from a...
I'm just thinking that you mentioned some of the technologies that you've acquired and companies you've acquired.
Right. Okay.
There may be some features of those technologies that might actually help people with their on-premises deployments, especially if you're deploying that technology as a service on premises rather than buying a box and putting it in. So there may be some things that you've learned from buying the cloud-based solutions that are going to help you deliver better on-premises solutions.
Talon's probably the best example of that, the global file cache.
Right.
So for edge locations and being able to geolocate data, pre-stage it and things like that on-prem, but having a cloud route as a source and being able to do that, that's the one that comes to top of mind. More cloud, less cost. This really comes down to three things. And as Steven said at the beginning, you may not recognize this NetApp if you haven't heard any of this stuff before. This is, at the end of the day, we are doing storage. Don't forget, we do still sell boxes. Yes, we do still have them. Some really good ones too. So you can still get our shared storage. And as I was just describing to Chris, what we've found is kind of the inverse of what we expect. Have people that are cloud architects or cloud native operators that are discovering some of our storage services that are above and beyond what the cloud providers are, have themselves natively, and then taking advantage of those services and the abilities and bringing it all back to on-prem with the new on-prem kit. Next thing, we're foraying into compute with Spot is probably the best example of that, where we can help you take advantage of kind of the black market of reserved instances and spot instances that I'm finding are hard for people to really get their heads around how that works. But Spot brings to the table the ability to manage all of those for you and save as much cost as you possibly can.
Oh, Nick.
Yep.
Help me understand, you know, NetApp wasn't a portfolio company prior to some of these products. And when I'm thinking about portfolio companies that are making the transition to cloud, I understand that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand that there's a bunch of services that need to be moved to the cloud, and I know how to engage those companies. Spot, ASTRA, Ontap, what's the coherent message if you're like a traditional cloud architect and you're engaging with NetApp? Like, I'm having a hard time anchoring, when do I engage NetApp when I have a problem?
It's a good question. How do you know which product to use in AWS? I don't know how many products and services they have in their catalog. So, I mean.
But I know naturally I know AWS has like 270 services.
Sure.
I know that that AWS probably has a solution. NetApp has kind of this discovery problem of, is this something that I should call my NetApp rep about, or should I look at one of my portfolio partners?
That's why we're here today, trying to change that perception. You're right. It is something. The biggest obstacle that we've dealt with over the last few years is that perception, the industry perception, and it's something that I've been on a personal mission for at least the last 3 years to try to change. And it's one of the big reasons that I'm presenting the material that I'm presenting today, because I want to feed you from the fire hose. I want to overwhelm you with the amount of things that we're doing that have absolutely nothing to do with boxes, to try and help change that perception so that everybody understands that we're not just doing boxes anymore, right? And it's going to take time. It's a big ship to turn. And the people have those preconceived notions, right? Thank you for that, Keith. Lastly on this, above and beyond Spot and managing your compute and your costs in that way, we also had one of our acquisitions in 2020 was CloudJumper. And they had some really cool technology, some agnostic ways of managing desktops across multiple clouds and on-prem. And we've now folded that into the Spot platform. I'll go over that a little bit later, called it Spot PC. And we're also managing virtual desktops. You'd be amazed how much of that relies on performance storage under the covers. Anybody that's done desktops knows how important that is. And the ability to do all of this across a single unified platform is really what comes down and is key. Everybody has heard of CI/CD before, right? Continuous integration, continuous delivery. There's one more thing I'd like to posit that's really important about this. And it's something that comes from the Spot innovation side of things, and it's continuous optimization. If you're doing CI/CD workflows for your applications, you'll probably have different requirements in an ongoing basis as your app evolves and as it grows, as it scales, all of that stuff. You're going to need to take and optimize the underlying infrastructure that your stack runs on in order to take the best advantage of that as you can. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that it's something to keep in mind. It's not just about, when you talk about CI/CD and applications, we're doing our best to bridge the two so that the applications drive the provisioning and configuration of the underlying infrastructure. And that's one of the big things that Spot does. So storage, compute, and even desktops, and then some. This really starts with the storage. To me, this is the foundation of the house. And of course, NetApp's going to stand up here and tell you storage rules the world. But at the end of the day, I think all of us have worked in infrastructure in some way before, where we know that you can have the biggest, baddest servers with the most demanding apps, but if the storage latency and throughput can't keep up, you're not going to have a good time. So taking a lot of these applications that our customers are wanting to move to the cloud and either rolling it their own way in a DIY fashion with virtual machines or instances, or trying to do it through a managed service, they were finding that the hurdle was storage performance and cost. So how best can we do that? Well, we came up with the Cloud Volumes platform to be able to give you all of those storage functionalities and throughputs and speeds and latencies that you're used to on-prem, but also deliver our rich data management stuff around that at the same time, and be able to bring in a lot of that stuff kind of natively or bring it along. We've spoiled customers on-prem for a couple of decades now. 6 nines of availability, sub-millisecond latencies, hundreds of thousands of IOPS. Like, when they go to the cloud, they kind of bring those expectations along with them. So that was one of the things that, not only that, but the ability to have all of their software management, backup, everything still work the same way. is an expectation that comes along. So we wanted to build a platform that could do that, and we have, and it's available across major cloud providers and continues to be available on-prem. This breaks down a little bit further into something that I like to refer to as IaaS versus PaaS, and you can kind of draw a conclusion here. If you're an Ontap customer and you really love all the flex and snap words, and you want to take advantage of the things that you're used to on-prem, fantastic. We can run Ontap in a virtual machine where you can control every single aspect of it and be comfortable. If you've got a dedicated storage team that really likes to get into the weeds of storage and really micromanage everything, parts of it, CVO is the answer for you, right? And we can deploy it through Cloud Manager, which we'll show you guys later. On the flip side of that coin, we've got a lot of app owners and lines of business that really don't care about RAID groups and disk aggregates and fancy networking and all of that stuff. They just want to have high performance storage for their applications. And really all they need is an NFS or SMB mount point, maybe an iSCSI one if they are that fringe. So we've got across all three different cloud providers now, we have a PaaS offering that you can just go out and create a volume, give it a name. How big do you want it to be? What service level do you want it delivered at? Done. And you get your NFS and SMB mount point. And that was the strat. We wanted the floor to be creating a new volume, not have to manage anything else underneath the covers of that.
So Nick, so AWS used to have CVS, and now I see FSX.
Yeah.
So CVS deprecated?
Yes.
Okay.
There are customers on there that we're working with to move them over, but in an official capacity, everything's going to FSX now.
I see Azure, AWS, Google, but with CITRIX Cloud, there's a lot of people who are using CITRIX Cloud, and it adds a little bit of an extra layer of complexity. Have you guys qualified this against CITRIX Cloud?
No, not that I'm aware of.
I was just going to ask the question really around, you talk about lines of business taking the technology directly.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a different delivery model internally when you're a line of business that previously might have taken technology from a central supplier internally, gone through some sort of workflow to purchase that in order and all the rest of it. How are the customers that are doing that route now through on demand and taking it directly? What are you seeing that they're doing in terms of their internal workflow, and actually how are they managing their own process to make sure that there isn't going to be that sprawl and there's still the degree of governance internally within the company?
It's a great point, and a lot of this points to the delivery model of FSX and the way that they've structured it with performance and capacity tiers. So instead of having to pay like per gigabyte prices and all of that stuff, and instead of having to get into some of the granularities like that, we want you to have a performance tier price and a capacity tier price, and that's really as simple as it gets. The beauty of FSX is that it's kind of the marrying of these two. It's kind of the best of both worlds. So it's a kind of a super hybrid that sits right on that blue line in the middle of where these two land. So you can still get down to FSX admin, which is effective, and you can get down and control the individual SVMs, but you can't get down and like change RAID groups and stuff like that.
So you added a FSX for NetApp on AWS, and you removed CVS, but actually they were two different products.
They were.
And so also probably different costs. So how are you going to manage the difference between the two products? Because even if you have plans to move some of the customers, I mean, there are massive differences from that point of view.
So when you say manage the costs, that assumes a lot that I can't really say in a public setting. There were reasons that we moved forward with it. There were reasons that we're deploying things the way that we've done with FSX, and I'll just leave that as a kind of teaser for the future. CVS for AWS was our first foray into doing this kind of thing. It was basically taking storage arrays, sticking them in Equinix, little BGP cross connect, and we, through the marketplace, one-time setup that was kind of a bear, and then you could create volumes in your VPs and mount them to your VP instances, right? It's so much easier now. Not having to deal with hardware that is an expense, not having to co-locate that hardware, which is an expense, not having to deal with networking and egress and direct connects, which is an expense. All of that stuff matters at the end of the day. That's about as delicately as I can put it without crossing a line, but FSX from a delivery standpoint from a cost effectiveness, all of that stuff. It's win, 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 win for both AWS and NetApp and our customers for that matter.
Okay.
You keep focusing on AWS. Is there a reason why you're focusing more on AWS than the other cloud providers?
Love that you brought
They're in
that
the
up.
room.
Let me do something real quick. Who was here in 2019 when I presented? All right, I think a good handful of you were, right? You guys might remember this. I brought this guy back.
Oh, yes.
All right. Everybody see that? Hopefully that's in the camera shot, but Google Cloud. We absolutely love working with Google Cloud because it's, at the end of the day, it's, for me, and I might be stepping out saying this, but it's the easiest one to deploy and the easiest one to manage, and is one of the most cost-effective ones of the three.
It's also run by George's brother.
That has nothing to do with it. Azure is still dealing with hardware, but the beauty of it is it's inside of Azure's regional data centers. It's wired up directly to the fabric interconnects. So you're effectively just getting direct access to a very large storage array in your VNets, any of your VMs that you deploy. That's the beauty of Azure NetApp Files. So we've got Google Cloud Volume Service that is simply go to the marketplace, click enable, turn it on, start provisioning volumes. In AWS, we've now got FSX where you deployed that. Again, takes about 30 minutes to stand it up. Then you're just deploying volumes inside of SVMs, file systems, basically. You can deploy multiple file systems across different regions. There's one more thing. We got to add one now. So now not only do we have the Google Cloud one, but because of the last couple of years of work that we've been doing with AWS, we received this at reInvent last year. I hope we get a Microsoft one soon. It's kind of lonely up here without them. This is just a testament to I told you we've been busy for the last few years. And this is really this is the pride of where it comes from. Glenda, to your point, I'm not intentionally favoring AWS in any way, but he is sitting right over here. You guys might not be able to see him, but that doesn't mean anything when it comes to where we stand as a platform, as for our Cloud Volumes platform. All of them you can do most of the same stuff with. The key difference to keep in mind is that all of the cloud providers have their own nuance of how to do certain things, right? In AWS, it's a VPC and an EC2 instance. In Azure, it's a VNet with a VM. And in Google Cloud, it's VPC with a VM. Understanding all the vocabulary and all that stuff is one thing, but just understand that under the covers, it's the same storage, it's Ontap. The takeaway here is that it's Ontap, regardless of what hardware it's on and what cloud provider it's in.
So Nick, help clarify some of where you guys are at from a positioning operations perspective. Back in 2014, 2015, it was all about the data fabric. That message has changed a little bit. We're hearing Ontap everywhere. Mm-hmm. When I'm listening to some of the cloud native startups, it's all about operational portability. When I'm listening to the multi-cloud focused storage providers, it's about the same data across multiple clouds. Where's the strategic value in going all in on Ontap everywhere?
The strategic value is that you really don't need anything else. The strategic value comes in the things that Ontap inherently brings with it. It's not about one vendor's name versus this startup versus their product versus this thing. All of the Flex and Snap words that are native to Ontap work everywhere, whether you're on-prem or in any of the three cloud providers. The door in the demo after we're done with the presentation, I'm going to show you what that looks like and what value that brings.
I get so that to me saying operational consistency across multiple clouds.
Yep.
What about the kind of the legacy NetApp message around the data fabric and having my data accessible across multiple clouds? Is that also part of this strategy?
It's just an evolution of the same messaging, basically. It's my way of saying data fabric, if you will. It's all it is.
So, Nick, do you plan to, standardize the operational model? I mean, FSX is a great product, theoretically. And do you have plans to bring something similar to the other clouds? Because now there is a difference in how you operate the three services.
What's the old phrase, watch that space? I can't say. But I can neither confirm nor deny. But to your point, FSX, awesome segue. Thank you very much. FSX was launched back at AWS Storage Day in September. September 2nd, that's right. pretty cool launch. I was really excited to be a part of that one because the things that we were able to finally talk about after 2 years of building this with AWS, really cool. And as I said, it blurs that line between IaaS and PaaS. You're getting all of the features of a managed service and still getting a little bit of the things that the storage engineers and infrastructure folks love, the ability to create and isolate separate SVMs for different workloads and define different performance tiers for different workloads. Some are capacity focused, some are performance focused. And that's only going to grow over time. We're going to continue to evolve that as a platform. So lots of good stuff coming with FSX, but the key takeaway for FSX, sold, supported, and billed by AWS. This is technically not a NetApp product. That's the big thing to keep in mind.
So this is awesome that we can now do these things, right? But what stands out to me still is the why. Because a couple of years ago, a cloud purist might have said that cloud isn't a place where we should be reliant on traditional enterprise data services. So what does your recent experience, like increase in uptake and adoption, say about what the reality of this situation actually is? What are the barriers to cloud adoption in reality?
That's a good question. It's about storage, man. And really, Adam, at the end of the day, you have to understand the difference between the enterprise and what you were describing as cloud native operators, kind of architect, people that are used to working in the cloud versus who would normally come from the enterprise. So I was saying earlier, we've spoiled them with a lot of availability, a lot of performance, a lot of that stuff over the years to be able to do some of that stuff on-prem. Well, now they want to take everything they're doing and they want to take and just sit it in AWS, have it all still work. And unfortunately, it's not that simple. So what we've done with FSX is make that as simple as possible. And it really starts with our installed base who are already used to Ontap, being able to leverage things like SnapMirror to mirror volumes up to the cloud, to FSX seamlessly. That keeps all of your storage efficiencies intact. We have a lot of people to start with backups in DR to be able to stage that almost as if FSX is their secondary data center or tertiary data center to be able to replace some legacy gear that they don't really want to refresh anymore. That's where it really starts. And it's kind of a bit of a drip feed in the beginning, but once they recognize and realize what they can do, we've seen it just kind of balloon and explode into, oh my God, I want to run SAP here now because the performance is good enough to do that.
All of these providers have now acquiesced to the fact that we're now to the point of running these enterprise data services in the cloud. It's now a different world, right?
Yeah.
So the question I have is, since this is an AWS service,
Yep.
I'm a customer, I go and purchase FSX and I'm running my stuff there and wonderful, great. And I want to integrate it with my on-prem, replicate, do whatever, to my and create a hybrid outcome. Support becomes the first obvious question,
Yep.
right? If I now am having trouble connecting, or I'm having a performance problem with my replication, or my dedupe isn't what I expected it to be, or 10,000 other things that come up.
Sure.
I mean, NetApp support is wonderful. AWS support is different. I'm not gonna say it's wonderful or not. It's just different. So what happened? What's the experience gonna be like for customers that are having issues with their FSX integrated with the on-prem? What's that experience gonna feel like?
Yeah, I can't rave enough for people that haven't used it yet. The team at AWS that's working on FSX are diehard Ontap fans. That was a big surprise to me. So Andy and Ed and the rest of the engineering team underneath it, this isn't some like sneaky play by AWS. This is like they're all in on Ontap. Like they absolutely love it. So they've built it in as the greater FSX thing that was launched about 4 years ago to build out this FSX portfolio. They recognize that Ontap is #1 storage operating system. It's got some of the largest market share. So they want to get in the business of enterprise to be able to move some of that stuff up to the cloud, right?
I guess, who do you call, right? I mean, who is NetApp going to take
It's an
first call
AWS
support?
service. That's whose bill it shows up on.
Okay, and if it turns, my only concern is that, from a finger pointing perspective, right? If the problem, is it, it's them, it's your on-prem thing, and then you can call NetApp support. Is there any arrangement, I guess, between NetApp support and the FSX team to work cooperatively, like a
Remember
FlexPod?
how FlexPod used to work with
That's
the
why I bring
Cisco
it
bat phone, and we would all kind of work
Right.
together?
So there is an official thing
If
together.
it's not something AWS can solve, and they point at it and go, it's an ONTAP thing, then
They'll create a
there's a back
ticket.
channel.
Okay, good.
Just curious, how safe is it?
Okay, how safe is it?
Yeah.
Do you want to vouch for how safe it is?
I'm happy to talk about how safe it is.
So it's really clarify that, because that's kind of a subjective.
So not a day goes by, you hear, oh my gosh, in the AWS S3 bucket, unsecured, something gets, taken from it.
Okay.
So how does that play with?
From my personal perspective, and I'll let AWS speak for AWS, that's usually
Please.
human configuration error.
Okay.
Making the bucket public when they shouldn't be, right?
Agreed. But is there any extra,
Well, we're not doing S3 stuff, but are you
you're
talking
not doing
about
S3
ONTAP
stuff? Okay,
specifically?
but that's a good delineation of that. Thank you.
Let me maybe just add to that, because that's a good question. I mean, if you think about the foundations for any service, this is not just FSX, but if you think about what the Cloud Foundations offers you, you have fine-grained control with things like identity and access management. You have key management services that automatically rotate keys. You have CloudWatch for being able to monitor all of the activity that's going on. And you've got things like CloudTrail. All of those have been fundamentally integrated. And I guess maybe to your answer there is this is why it took 2 years to build from the ground up. This is not just Ontap software running on an EC2 instance. Okay?
Gotcha.
The fundamental difference is this is highly integrated into the entire and wired in to the entire AWS foundational services.
Got it.
So that's why we have that confidence of being able to offer that support. We don't want finger pointing going on, and there is no finger pointing going on because it's an AWS service that we provide to customers.
Okay.
We're both kind of all in on this.
Thanks for clarifying.
It's two different companies, right?
So is it not Ontap on an EC2 instance?
It's Ontap, but we can't talk about the underlying infrastructure. So let's talk about how we control these. Now we've talked about all the different things that we're doing in the clouds. Now let's bring it all together. Right, because as it was, I forget who brought it up earlier, there's different nuance and everything of working in each of the different cloud providers. And the way that we bring that together is kind of a play on a universal control plane, right? Bringing that together, allowing you to control all of your stuff, not only your on-prem, but also bringing it up to managing all of your cloud stuff. Whether you've got it in Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS, or all of the above, this is where ONTAP everywhere really becomes real in practice. Drag and drop functionality, full API stack, the ability to control everything you need to manage the movement and management of your storage across any of the cloud providers, right? Really, if we break down Cloud Manager, it comes into these kind of 6 pillars of things. It's about cloud volumes, which we've talked about way too much at this point. Cloud backup, which is something that I'm very excited about, and we're going to continue to expand on that. Being able to take advantage of things like object storage in the cloud to back up on-prem arrays, cloud resources, all of that into a centralized indexed repository. That's really, that's one of the big things I'm excited about. Second thing I'm really excited about is right next to it called Cloud Datasense. We used to call this Cloud Compliance. This is the result of the Cognigo acquisition from 2018 or 19. I don't know. 3 or 4 years ago, we acquired a company called Cognigo. They had a really slick way of just looking at a mount point or a data source and scanning all of the data that was underneath it and being able to identify PII, things, GDPR compliance, CCPA compliance, anything that you might have that an auditor would hate that you have, right? Also giving you the ability to look into databases, right? So you now have all of this stuff. The Cloud Datasense gives you that discovery classification element. There's a governance arm to it, and then there's a compliance arm to it as well to be able to do some reporting for any auditing that you might have to do for regulatory needs. For monitoring all of this infrastructure, we rebuilt what we used to call on-command insights from the ground up as a SaaS application. It's now called Cloud Insights. Cloud Insights now runs in a browser. You have multiple dashboards that you can build across all of the different cloud products that you have, our stuff and other. And it can also monitor all of the stuff that you have on-prem, our stuff and other. So if you're looking for that central piece of software that can provide you full monitoring, customized dashboards, you can build an entire NOC with 9 65-inch TVs on the wall and have different dashboards for different people to monitor different things. Cloud Insights is extremely powerful and oftentimes slept on. One of the best parts about it is if you're a NetApp customer, you get it for free. Everybody heard that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just want to make sure. Now, there is add-ons and freemium kind of upgrades as far as like how much historical data you want to keep and how much you want to, right? But if you're a NetApp customer and you've got a support contract with us, all of you get Cloud Insights for free to monitor all of your NetApp stuff as a baseline kind of start. If you want to start adding on third-party managed units, as we refer to them, sure, there's a little subscription. It's a very consumer-style subscription that you can do for like standard, basic, premium sort of stuff. Cloud tiering is a lot of fun. This is one of the extensions of doing what we've done on-prem with fabric pools. Imagine if we could now do that in the cloud. Block level tiering down to object chunks. That gets really fun. And of course, ASTRA, we're going to go a little bit deeper on down the road, but all of this is really driven through Cloud Manager as a central point. Cloud backup, I kind of just waxed poetic on that. We can skip past that one. Datasense is the one I really want everybody to try. I would love to hear you guys' take on Cloud Datasense. It's one of my favorite things that not enough people are talking about that we've put out there.
Yes.
The ability.
Talk a bit more about that.
Yes, because I'm going to show you guys the reporting. I'm going to show you kind of a dummy data POC of what it looks like and all of the reporting and graphs and all of that stuff. You can give read-only versions of it to leadership to show and to auditors and things like that to be able to drive conversations around that. But please do me a favor, go try out Cloud Datasense. It doesn't matter. All it needs is an NFS or an SMB or an object mount point, a path. It doesn't need a specific, it doesn't need Ontap, it doesn't need a specific kind of hardware. Cloud Insights we just talked about, but there was one part that I wanted to make sure of that everybody understood is that we are up over, I think over 550 managed units at this point. Managed units are the entities that we can monitor and build dashboards around. So whether that's networking stuff, whether that's VMware, whether that's your old Isilon that you can't stand anymore, right? It doesn't matter. Plus all of the cloud entities across all three cloud providers all have managed units. You can watch your EC2 instances, you can watch your VNets and your VMs and your VNets in Azure. All of this stuff works, right? This is where it gets really fun. And I don't know how Kubernetes savvy this audience is, so I'm going to assume that everybody, because this is Cloud Field Day, right? Everybody's heard of Kubernetes at this point, right? Right? Probably too much. One of my favorite parts of Cloud Insights is something that we built into it to be able to look and do deep inspection into a cluster. So we can drill down into each of the worker nodes, and we can drill down into each of the pods. We can drill down into each of the things, look at all of the networking, and almost like if there's any kind of bullying scenario that might be going on for resources, contention that might be happening across all of these. We give you beautiful graphs and dashboards. This is what a cluster looks like being monitored and managed. I think there's about 30 nodes in there that it's looking at. You can click on an individual node and look down, inspect the pods that are underneath it, see if there's any networking contentions. All of this, again, for free if you're a NetApp customer. The fact that people are still sitting at kubectl trying to figure this stuff out just blows my mind.
So can I just qualify that a second there?
Yeah, go.
So if I buy my FSX Ontap through Amazon, do I still get this as a non-NetApp customer for free?
I don't know. That's a good question. Holy crap, you stumped me. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I think so, but I don't want to say absolutely.
Because ultimately, you're promoting all of these things as cloud services, but you said yourself that you have plenty of customers
I haven't been
who
asked
are
that
only coming through that route.
Oh,
Let me find out. I'll get back to you before we leave today.
that opens up another question.
Cloud secure. One of the things that's important. So it's great that you can monitor everything, but what can you proactively do about preventing stuff from happening? This is one of the hidden gems. And we used to have this Cloud Secure as an individual kind of its own product. We ended up folding it in because it made more sense to do it that way and bring it into the Cloud Insights portfolio. What does it do exactly? It's going to monitor activity. Well, what does that mean? That sounds kind of generic. We're actually looking at behavior and building ML models around behavior of access to data underneath the covers. So what does that mean? Well, let me just show you a picture. You've got archive data sitting there. One of the biggest attack vectors for ransomware is stuff people haven't touched for years. It's one of the easiest ways to get in and start encrypting without being known. We've got two ways to do this now. We've got F policy built into the Ontap core engine, and we can see at the core of Ontap when activity is doing things that are different and not normal. In addition to that, if you're monitoring a particular resource, we can, with Cloud Insights, Cloud Secure can detect that file hasn't been accessed in about 3 years. Why is it all of a sudden getting all of this write activity? Snapshot, just in case. That's what Cloud Secure does. As soon as data starts getting written, you can see there's a little bit of gap right there, but where that red line is that is Cloud Secure triggering an Ontap snapshot. So then we can go figure out what's going on. The amount of data that you save by just taking that just in case snapshot, it costs you 150 megabytes to take that snapshot? Nothing, right? But the ability to roll back to that in a massive ransomware attack like this, that's what everybody wants to know what ransomware looks like. That's what ransomware looks like. Old data that's been sitting there for years that all of a sudden has a ton of write traffic on it. And we have the ability now, not only in Ontap, but with Cloud Secure monitoring it with modeling built around it. All right, it's real. We can also keep a log of all of these as potential attacks so that you can go and investigate it. This is the machine learning figuring out what your behaviors are with your data and what gets accessed on what kind of schedule. All of this is built in to Cloud Secure and Cloud Insights. Okay, enough about storage, enough about data. Let's get into some app stuff, because this is where we're going to start talking about top-down management of applications and underlying infrastructure, and really not having to deal with that stuff anymore. We're going to talk a little bit about Kubernetes, right? So Spot was an acquisition of ours that came at fall of 2020, and it's been about a year and a half now since we brought them on. So Spot came on, and at the end of the day, what the thing to understand about Spot is today when we go out and we provision infrastructure, or we use APIs to let or YAML files to provision infrastructure driven by an application, a lot of that is kind of the on-demand resources that are available. There's different ways that you can buy compute in the cloud. And this is really fundamental and important to understand. You can buy the on-demand instances, which we all know as EC2 or VMs across the different 3 cloud providers. But underneath the covers, there's these things called reserved instances that you can kind of like bid on and make long-term deals on at cheaper rates. In addition to that, there's something called a spot instance. That is, you can get one of those maybe for an hour. Right? And there's a lot of nuance to understand, and there's some complexity involved with making sure that it's not going to get yanked out from under you. But one of the things that Spot does is automate a lot of that provisioning. We also predict, we monitor what you use, we monitor your traffic, we monitor all of your utilization to make sure that we have resources available for you to scale up and scale down your application based on demand. And that's the key thing to understand. The application and the demand and the scale are what's driving the provisioning of the underlying compute infrastructure. Wow, we've gotten to that point. It's almost autonomous. But in addition to that, we're doing things like development, or I don't want to say DevOps, all the ops, FinOps, SecOps, and desktop ops. Desktop ops, anybody heard of desktop ops? That's a fun one, right? So the product family for Spot, it's its own little portfolio in its own world, right? At the end of the day, the core of it is Spot Eco, and that gives you, let me just jump to that one. Spot Eco is working with reserved instances, and based on the time that you're going to need that reserved instance, it allows you to set that kind of bedrock foundation, lock you in for some good pricing on core reserved instance resources for your long-term applications. These are your applications that are going to be around. They're your core websites, your core web applications, and things like that. This is not really addressing the bursty kind of nature of some of those things. That's where the next thing comes in. This is where you start getting into Spot instances to be able to take advantage of demand. So you might have that reserved instance that's got a certain threshold, but bam, it's Black Friday, and all of a sudden you've got 1 million people on your website. Spot instances. And you might only need them for 24 hours, right? And then after that, activity comes back down and things settle back down to where your reserved instance levels are at. Right? But the ability to have both of those there as an ongoing, on-demand resource management, Spot just manages all of it for you. And you can choose to have something managed, or you can choose to not have something managed on a per application stack basis, right? So we can import all of your stuff, and we can allow you to manage it at the same, whether on an individual basis. Beyond doing this for VMs and infrastructure, this is where we start getting into microservices and Ocean. Spot Ocean is the ability to integrate at the pod level. We insert an operator pod across the entire cluster, and we're able to do all of the things that we were just doing for reserved instances and Spot instances, but now for your worker nodes in your Kubernetes clusters, all maintained with Ocean. Ocean is just one of the products. And so we had Eco to do reserve. We have Elastigroups to do some of the Spot instances, burst demand, and things like that. but now we have Ocean as well to be able to do that at the much more granular level within the microservices. And we're going to take that one step further. We're now going to do this with Apache Spark. Ocean Wave is kind of a specific version of it for Spark that lets you do this kind of on-demand provisioning based on demand. Whether it's a batch job running and you're just doing a big job, or whether you've got a lot of demand for analysis. Either way, underneath the covers, it's Kubernetes. Underneath the covers, Ocean is sticking the operator into your cluster to be able to monitor all that stuff and learn about where your demand is, learn about your resource utilization of all of your nodes, be able to take advantage of all that stuff.
So Nick, are those optimizations within those execution groups? So for instance, is the optimization just for Kubernetes, just for VMs, instances, but not cross technology? So not looking at it and going, you're running this in the wrong place. This shouldn't be run as a EC2 instance. This should be run as a set of containers because it'll be more efficient. Are you doing that level of cross-cutting it yet?
I'm not 100% sure about that specifically. Like we're not going, hey dummy, don't run an EC2. This refactor your app and run it. Like almost all applications at this point can be broken down and refactored into microservices, but we're not doing that kind of cross communication. What we are doing is providing a single inventory tree, if you will, across Elastic groups and Ocean to be able to see all of you, whether it's one or the other.
Okay.
You could certainly do some evaluation and comparison about would this run better as an installable on a VM or would this run better broken down as a microservice in a pod? There's pros and cons for that, but no, I don't know if we're doing any kind of recommendation like that.
Yeah, if you're running spot instances and things are very short-lived, being built and dropped and rebuilt,
yep,
there might be an argument that there's a better way of factoring
you should be
it.
doing
But,
it.
yeah,
You should refactor.
yeah.
So even with Spot, folks love Spot. That they're great value, but Spot instances obviously can fail in the middle of a job. If so, there's feedback. And one of the questions I got on Twitter was, how's this different between like a Grafana or Prometheus or some other scheduler?
Oh, those are just monitoring platforms.
Yeah.
So
we're provisioning infrastructure.
So you're provisioning infrastructure, which is great. So if I'm not Kubernetes centric, and I want to use Spot, because Spot kind of predates a little bit of Kubernetes a little bit. At least they're concurrent.
Okay.
If I wanted to just create a Python script to run some batch files to do some number crunching, and a Spot instance fails, I don't need to be, the question is, do I need to be Kubernetes savvy in order to get back the XML that says a job has failed because X, Y, and Z, restart the job? Can I create my own orchestrator?
I see where you're going. So there's two answers to that question. One of the things that Spot by NetApp brings to the table is the unnecessary, you don't need to know Kubernetes. Just give us your application, give us your stack, give us your configuration, whether it's Python or a Jupyter Notebook in Wave for Spark or any of that kind of stuff. We're going to take over provisioning the infrastructure that your application needs. When it's managed by Spot, we're going to provision reserved instances and Spot instances and as needed to do that. You're never going to touch infrastructure. We just need your container or whatever
the job is, right?
Right. So whether it's a Python script or a full application stack or a pod, YAML file that's going to deploy a pod, a replica set, like whatever that is, Spot can do it.
Yeah, when you do that provisioning, does Spot figure out which region to go in? So it might say, actually, US East is too expensive. Let's put this in Ohio or US West or something.
I'm not 100% sure, but when you put your AWS account in, for example, it's going to be tied to that. So it's going to know what your subscription is based on where your location is. There's other IAM roles and things like that under the covers that you've got to configure that kind of dictate and set the path on where it's going to provision that stuff. A lot of it has to do with where the reserved instances and Spot instances were acquired from. So I'm going to do air quotes and say shopping. We are constantly shopping for deals on reserved instances and Spot instances for our customers to be able to take advantage of this stuff. So yes, to your point, we do keep an inventory of what's available out there. And if the latency is not too bad, there's comparisons across all of that stuff where we can potentially put it in a different region if it behooves you to do so. But we're not going to, I don't believe we're going to ever automatically move something to somewhere that might be detrimental to the application running.
That's part of what I was wondering, because that gets to be quite a complicated thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I might have instances that are running currently in Sydney. And the latency is going to be quite different if it suddenly gets moved to what is cheaper, but US, maybe I'm not too keen on US East because, if anything's going to go down, it's going to be US East.
Hey, there's a new US East in Ohio. That's not DC. The other thing is you have the capability to delineate and set like what regions you want to operate in. So if you don't want that sort of widespread thing, you can go in and say, I only want this stack, this app to run in this region. So you can do that. I could give you a whole hour on some of the stuff that Ocean does for Kubernetes and that Weve does for Spark. But I want you to, one of our last acquisitions that we made last year was Data Mechanics. This brings in a whole new auto tuning. What if we could look at your Spark jobs? What if we could go in and inspect your Jupyter notebooks, just kind of tweak it and tune it where we found some things that weren't exactly configured or coded properly and make that run better. That's where Data Mechanics comes in, and the integration with Ocean and Weve to be able to just really drive that for you. Again, to Keith's point, you never have to touch the infrastructure and stuff like that. It's gonna do it. It's gonna make recommendations, or you can just go fully managed and just let it take the wheel, hands off. Right? A lot of times this reminds me of the early days of DRS and VMware. Spot PC is the last thing I wanted to cover here really quick. This is, what if we could do all of that stuff that we just talked about? Reserved instances, spot instances, but for desktops. Power users that need a lot of processor, a lot of memory, things like that, or data entry users that really just need a thin client and just some kind of green screen or something like that. The ability to scale these based on demand and all of that stuff, right? Same concepts. And the last one I'll tease here is a new one, which it really falls into the SecOps side of things. We want to do inspection into security, and manage a lot of that to automatically close up vulnerabilities, to automatically take advantage and lead you down some of this stuff. We won't talk about that one yet. I got to get going. This is where I want to close out today. Kubernetes does bring DevOps to the forefront. A lot of the stuff that we've used Kubernetes for in the past has been a lot of throwaway test dev work. Now it's made it into the mainstream over the last few years. And even all of the service providers are now offering full-blown supported managed services, whether it's EKS, AKS, GKE, and we have a lot of people that are rolling their own. They're really taking advantage of being able to do some of that stuff that Kubernetes can come to the table. There's complexity involved with it, right? Look at some of these stats. And this is from both CNCF, their surveys that they do every year, and 451 research. This is not our data. This is coming from external. 95% of new applications use containers. 55% of companies report some or full adoption of containers. 78% of companies, this is the important one, because this is where the differentiator is. 78% of companies run or plan to stateful applications in production. This is the one that blew my mind from the CNCF survey a year ago. Do you run stateful applications in containers? 55%, yes, in production. Stateful. So we can talk about serverless all day long, but when we talk about enterprise, they need persistence. They need that constant data. They need the backup. They need the recovery. They need the access, right? So you might be switching from an installable on Windows or Linux to a container as a runtime, but the data still needs to persist at the end of the day. This is where ASTRA comes into play. And I want to preface this by saying we've been doing multi-tier application backup and recovery and cloning for all of the biggest tier 1 applications for a couple of decades now. In 2008, I was deploying Snap Manager for Oracle and Exchange on my NetApp systems, right? This is very similar to that. It's just in the Kubernetes world. And I'm not going to call it Snap Manager for Kubernetes or any of that silly stuff, but I want you all to understand that we've been doing multi-tier backup and application quiescing kind of stuff for a long time. That's what ASTRA is at the end of the day. We're taking and inspecting underneath the covers, and we're managing that application, building protection policies around it in the Kubernetes world. And then once you have a backup of that stack, you can then clone it out with snapshots, the same way Ontap has done for decades. There's not a lot of stuff that's foreign here for people familiar with Ontap. It's just got a fun, cool hipster name, and it's doing a lot of this, and it's dealing with Kubernetes. So people often get confused and wrapped around the axle about what it's actually doing. It's a multi-tier application backup and cloning tool for now. This is where things get interesting. You can also do all of this programmatically with REST and with our web interface. And you can also use this new thing, which we recently announced. I want to put my sunglasses on and be Morpheus for a minute. What if I told you that you could run an Ontap storage array as a pod inside of a Kubernetes cluster? What if I told you that your applications in your pods could have their own dedicated storage array? That's what, to me, that's what ASTRA Data Store is. So we're now, so Ontap everywhere, right? Even in your pods. So now we have the ability to take Ontap and kind of insert it into a cluster stack. So an individual application can have an isolated storage array all to itself, regardless of how it scales, regardless of how many replicas it has, regardless of how many tiers it has across different containers. You can all have individual NFS and SMB mount points going out to just those pods that will never kind of transcend beyond the pod, the stack. That's ASTRA Data Store, and here's kind of an architecture diagram of what it looks like. It's currently in private preview. I'd love to sign some of you guys up that are super Kate savvy and want to play with this stuff. Glenn, I got you.
Yeah, does this support more of the converged model where the storage layer is distributed across all Kubernetes nodes in addition to dedicated storage nodes?
Think of it more of, so the way to describe it is you can have a cluster with multiple node stacks in it, worker pools. So you can have an instance of ASTRA Data Store that can work inside of a worker pool. And it really depends on what your configuration is as to what it can see and what it can. So the ability that you have to, in this model that's on the screen right here, you have basically a one cluster all of the pods that are in that cluster can share it and be able to move around between it. But you can isolate it further if you so desire.
Yep. Is there data mobility from volumes or whatever we call them in ASTRA Data Store with external, quote unquote, real Ontap environments?
I'm not sure, but it's Ontap, so why not?
Well, that's what
I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Okay, fair enough.
So you're quite technically, can I go in and vol move?
Or just SnapMirror, whatever.
Sure.
Right, that's cool. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, the ability to snap mirror across ASTRA Data Store instances between Kubernetes clusters and different cloud providers and on-prem, like a lot of that, that's where my head starts going. Like,
Core to cloud edge, yeah. It's really the edge play that I'm very, very interested in that.
Yeah.
You mentioned configuring Jupyter Notebooks so that they work better,
yes.
like tuning them and thin clients. That leads me to think, do you guys have your own protocol, or are you still depending on other, providers like the cloud itself for the protocol, like HTML or whatever? What are you, what makes it perform better? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's the ability to optimize your code in your notebooks. Normally your Python stuff that's going to be in your notebook, right, Glenna? So it's no different than when Spot provisions something, you're normally giving it some kind of piece of code, whether that's YAML or some deployment script or anything like that, or a Jupyter Notebook in the instance of Spark, right? We're going to optimize the instance of Spark, and where the data mechanics tooling comes in is having some of that auto tuning capability based on the code that's in your Jupyter Notebook to be able to inspect and look at all of that and tune the underlying Kubernetes infrastructure appropriately using some of the operators in Ocean. I hope I said all that right.
So
I'm no Spot expert either. So just to be clear, this is not one of my specific areas. It's something I'd love to follow up on with you. And I can get you to the right resource if you want to go deep down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm just curious on how the data is transported and how it is compiled at the endpoint and at the source. So okay, that's fine.
So closing out. This is the big bow, the big ribbon. We got 3 different things we can really do for you here. The use cases are really important to understand this. And the takeaway is the more you operate in the cloud, the less you talk about infrastructure, the more you talk about workloads. And at the end of the day, what's important there is understanding the needs of the workload, not necessarily over provisioning infrastructure so that I'm covered for the next 3 years. That's the big thing that you want to understand. At the end of the day, we want to leverage the cloud to optimize on-prem and lower costs, right, across the board. So there may be facilities that operate in the cloud that are cheaper than hosting it and running it yourself on-prem, right? Archive data. Right? Who wants to sit on a bunch of petabytes of archive data and run the power and cooling necessary to do that when I can just mirror that up to the cloud into an S3 bucket or into a FSX instance or into something else that might run more efficiently, and I'm only paying a cents per gigabyte kind of metric as part of it. The second part of this is operationalizing and optimizing the public cloud. So taking advantage of all of the things that you might use operationally in the cloud above and beyond the storing and managing of data and things like that. So this is where you begin to look for things like universal control planes. This is where you're going to look for things like centralizing and coalescing a lot of stuff where you might have it in disparate entities right now. You're going to start bringing a lot of this stuff together and centralizing it. And you're going to start taking advantage of some of those resources that the cloud brings to bear to optimize your environment and be able to carry a lot of that stuff forward. Right. The third one is where you've just gone whole hog. You don't care about infrastructure on-prem anymore, and you're just full cloud native. Or if you're a new startup and you've got an app or you're building something that's going to run on one of these, you're probably not running on-prem infrastructure. You're all in on one of the cloud providers. So this is where we're looking at cloud ops and developers, the ability, whether it's SREs or whether it's application developers that really just want to write code. And they want to let that code determine what infrastructure is going to be provisioned under the covers. That's where a lot of this comes in. That's where we're seeing ASTRA for their, in a cloud native world, what do they do for backup? They need a tool just like infrastructure people needed for Exchange and SQL, right? So now we have ASTRA to be able to take advantage of that. They can run it themselves in a DIY fashion with ASTRA Control, or we've got a NetApp managed version of that called ASTRA Control Service that you just pay a monthly service on. We'll take care of it for you. We'll help you support it. We'll help you set up all of your jobs, all of that stuff, right? That was the last one. The last part of this is being able to deliver value sooner. And that's the thing I want to make sure that everybody understands is like, when you're an app owner, you really just want to get your code out there for everybody to use, right? You hate the bureaucracy of everything. You don't want to deal with a lot of it. And as someone who used to be in charge of managing the queue of departments that wanted access to resources on-prem, yeah, we've all been in that boat at some point, and they hate that. They don't want to deal with us anymore, right? They can do in 10 minutes for $100 what we used to make them sit in a queue for 6 months and charge them $1 million for, right? No, they've moved on.